The sun was a brilliant, unforgiving eye in a sky of polished blue, and James stood at the edge of the wedding reception's wooden dance floor, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs, his hand sweating as it held the cool, slender fingers of his neighbor, Eleanor. He had been watching her all afternoon, a ghost of the woman he remembered, a vibrant spirit now wrapped in a quiet, dignified sorrow that made his chest ache. The music swelled, a hopeful, soaring melody that seemed to pull them both onto the polished planks, and as he led her into the waltz, the world fell away. It was just the press of her hand, the scent of her perfume like summer rain, and the way her smile, a hesitant, fragile thing, finally reached her eyes. They moved as one, a perfect, silent apology for years of missed chances and unspoken words, and for a dizzying, beautiful moment, James felt a lightness he had not known in a decade. Then, as the final notes faded into applause and the laughter of the other guests, Eleanor leaned in, her voice a soft, devastating whisper against his ear that cut through the sunshine and the celebration with the cold finality of a winter wind. "James," she breathed, her eyes shimmering with a profound, unreadable pain, "everyone saw you choose me. If this moment of raw honesty and unexpected connection stirs something within you, if you believe in the power of kindness, the grace of forgiveness, the enduring nature of hope, and the profound beauty of second chances, please like this video, leave a thoughtful comment, share it with someone who might need to hear this story, and subscribe to our channel to become a part of our family and our community, because these are the stories that remind us what it truly means to be human." James froze, his hand still resting gently on the small of her back, the warmth of her body a stark contrast to the sudden chill that had crept into his bones. He stared down at her, his mind reeling, trying to parse the meaning of her words. The music had stopped, the cheerful chatter of the other guests washing over them like the distant roar of an ocean, and the bright afternoon sun seemed to illuminate every painful detail on her face, the faint lines of worry etched around her mouth, the shadows of sleepless nights that clung beneath her eyes. He had chosen her. Of course he had chosen her. The moment he had seen her enter the garden, a vision in a pale blue dress that echoed the color of her eyes, he had crossed the entire sprawling lawn, leaving behind a conversation with his brother and a plate of untouched cake, just to be near her. He had seen the way the other men, his old friends and some strangers, had watched her, their gazes curious and appreciative, and a fierce, protective instinct had roared to life inside him, a feeling he had buried so deep he had forgotten it existed. He had asked her to dance, not out of pity, not out of a sense of neighborly obligation, but because he could not bear to see her standing on the periphery, a solitary figure of quiet dignity amidst the boisterous joy, and it seemed so obvious, so natural, that he would want to be the one to make her smile. "Eleanor, I don't understand," he finally managed, his voice a low, ragged murmur, the sounds of the wedding fading into a dull hum around them. "I wanted to dance with you. I didn't even think about anyone else." A single, shimmering tear escaped from the corner of Eleanor's eye and traced a slow, deliberate path down her cheek, a trail of liquid silver in the bright light. She looked away from him, out across the manicured lawns and the vibrant flower beds, her gaze fixed on something far away, something only she could see. "My mother," she began, her voice trembling like a leaf in a storm, "she told me she was so proud of me for coming. She said it took more courage than she had ever seen. And then she said, everyone saw him choose you. They saw you, Eleanor. Not the scandal, not the past, just you." James felt his heart splinter in his chest, a shard of glass piercing the very core of him. He remembered the scandal, of course. Everyone in their small, tight-knit community remembered it, a piece of local folklore that had been whispered about for years. Eleanor's husband, a man named Thomas, had been the golden boy, a charming entrepreneur with a smile that could charm a snake, until it was revealed that his entire empire was built on fraud and deceit, stealing the life savings of their friends and neighbors, including James's own parents. The shame and the anger had been so immense, so all-consuming, that it had swallowed Eleanor whole, painting her with the same brush of suspicion and contempt, even though she had been just as much a victim as everyone else. She had been forced to sell her home, her beautiful, sprawling house with the rose garden and the white picket fence, and had moved into the small, modest cottage next to James's own house, a quiet, shrinking woman trying to rebuild a life from the ashes of a ruined one. For years, James had been a silent witness to her quiet penance. He saw her walk to the grocery store with her head down, saw her rush to her car to avoid the pointed stares and the hushed whispers, saw her tend her tiny garden with a desperate, lonely devotion. He had wanted to reach out, to tell her that he understood, that he did not hold her responsible for her husband's sins, but a stubborn, bitter part of him, the part that remembered his parents struggling to pay their bills, had held him back. He had been a coward, hiding behind a wall of polite neighborliness and a simmering, misplaced anger that he had convinced himself was righteous. But the truth was, he had always seen her. He had seen her strength in the face of adversity, her grace under immense pressure, her kindness to the stray cat that wandered into her yard, a creature she nurtured back to health despite having so little for herself. And now, in this moment of glorious, sun-drenched celebration, he had finally, publicly, unequivocally, acknowledged her. He pulled her closer, his arms encircling her in a gentle, protective embrace, not caring who was watching, not caring about the old ghosts of the past that haunted this garden. "They saw me choose you, Eleanor, because it was always you," he confessed, the words tumbling out in a raw, unburdened rush. "I was just too much of a fool to realize it until now. I was so caught up in the past, in my own pain and my own pride, that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. I saw you struggle, I saw you grieve, and I did nothing. I stood behind my fence and I watched you fight your battles alone, and I told myself it was none of my business, that my parents' loss gave me the right to feel angry, to feel justified in my silence. But it was never about my parents, was it? It was about me. I was scared. Scared of what people would say, scared of opening myself up to a pain I couldn't understand, scared of seeing you as anything other than the ghost of the wife of the man who had wronged my family." Eleanor looked up at him, her tear-stained face a mask of disbelief and fragile, cautious hope. The sun caught the flecks of gold in her blue eyes, illuminating them with a dazzling light that took his breath away. The music had started up again, a softer, more contemplative melody, and the other dancers had swirled away from them, giving them a private, silent island in the middle of the celebration. The scent of jasmine and freshly cut grass filled the air, a sweet perfume that contrasted with the bitter sweetness of their conversation. "You saw me," she whispered, her voice so faint it was almost lost to the breeze. "All this time, you saw me?" James nodded, a tear of his own blurring his vision, a hot, shameful tear that felt cleansing, a release of a decade of pent-up sorrow and regret. "I saw you," he confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "I saw you when you brought my sick cat back to life. I saw you when you shoveled the snow from my walkway before I even woke up. I saw you the day you came home from the funeral, your face a mask of such profound sorrow that I had to look away because I couldn't bear the weight of it. I saw you, Eleanor, and the worst part is, I chose to look away. I chose my own comfort over your suffering." The words hung between them, heavy with the weight of all the years they had wasted in silence and separation. Eleanor pulled back slightly, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, her gaze searching his face as if seeing him for the first time. The anger that he had clung to, the resentment he had nurtured, seemed to melt away in the warmth of her touch, replaced by a profound sense of humility and a desperate, aching need for her forgiveness. "I was so angry," she finally said, her voice stronger now, laced with a quiet, simmering frustration. "For so long, I was just so angry. At Thomas, at the world, at everyone who looked at me like I was the villain in their story. I hid in my house, I became invisible, because it was easier than facing the judgment. I convinced myself that I deserved it, that if I just kept my head down and stayed quiet, the pain would eventually go away. But it never did. It just festered, turning into a cold, hard knot in my chest. And I saw you, James, my neighbor, a man who was also a victim of my husband's greed. I saw you pull into your driveway every night, saw you laughing with your friends, saw you living a life that was so full and so normal, and I resented you for it. I resented your freedom." He flinched, the confession striking him with unexpected force, a mirror reflecting back his own guilt and misplaced bitterness. He had resented her too, hadn't he? He had resented her for being a constant reminder of the pain her husband had caused, a walking symbol of betrayal and loss. Their quiet, familiar hatred had been a twisted, silent pact, a way to avoid the terrifying prospect of genuine connection. They had used their shared history as a weapon and a shield, building walls not just between their properties, but between their hearts. "We were both fools," James murmured, his thumb gently tracing the soft curve of her cheek, wiping away the lingering traces of her tears. "Two lonely people, hiding behind a fence, afraid to see that the enemy we were fighting wasn't each other. It was the past. It was a ghost we were both letting haunt us. And the whole time, everyone else saw it. They saw two people who were meant to heal each other, who were meant to be the balm for each other's wounds, but we were too stubborn, too scared to even try." Eleanor's breath hitched, and a small, genuine smile, the first he had seen in years, began to bloom on her lips. It was a hesitant, fragile thing, like a flower pushing through the cracks in a pavement, but it was undeniably beautiful. "My mother," she repeated, a new sense of wonder in her voice, "she said that today, I finally let myself be seen. I walked into this wedding with my head held high, not because I was pretending to be someone I wasn't, but because I was finally ready to accept that I didn't have to carry the shame of Thomas's choices anymore. I was terrified, James. I nearly turned around and ran back home a dozen times. But then I saw you, standing across the lawn, and you looked at me. Not with pity, not with judgment, but with a look that was so genuine, so longing, that I knew I had to stay. And you walked across that whole lawn, leaving everything and everyone behind, just to be with me. Everyone saw you choose me, James. And in that moment, I didn't feel like the pariah anymore. I felt like I was home." The band launched into a lively, upbeat number, and the guests around them clapped and cheered, the joyous energy of the day surging back in full force. But for James and Eleanor, the world had narrowed to a single, perfect point of light, a bubble of newfound understanding and profound connection. The long, dark years of silence and resentment had been a necessary crucible, a fire that had burned away their pride and their fear, leaving behind only the pure, unadulterated truth of what they meant to each other. They had both been prisoners of a past that neither of them had created, bound by a shared history that had kept them apart, until a simple dance in the sunlight had shattered their chains. It wasn't about forgetting the past, or forgiving Thomas for his crimes. It was about choosing each other over the ghosts of yesterday, a profound act of courage and hope that had been witnessed by their entire community. As the music swirled around them, James took Eleanor's hand once more, his grip firm and reassuring. He looked out at the crowd of smiling faces, his brother, his old friends, Eleanor's proud mother, a sea of witnesses who had seen the whole, beautiful, painful truth, and he felt a surge of gratitude so immense it almost brought him to his knees. They had been spectators to a miracle, the slow, agonizing, and ultimately triumphant resurrection of two hearts from the ashes of a shared tragedy. He turned back to Eleanor, his eyes shining with a newfound light, the light of a man who had finally, after all these years, allowed himself to love and be loved in return. "Well then," he said, his voice full of a quiet, resilient joy, "I guess we better give them a show worth remembering." And as they began to move to the rhythm of the song, their steps light and their hearts full, James knew that his life, like Eleanor's, was no longer defined by the past, but by the beautiful, uncertain, and wonderfully hopeful promise of the future they would build together. It was a lesson in choosing courage over comfort, connection over isolation, and love over fear, a lesson they had both needed to learn, and a lesson that had been written in the simple, powerful act of a neighbor choosing another in the bright light of a summer's day. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Before you go, let us know in the comments, what does choosing connection over isolation mean to you, and how can we all be more like James and Eleanor in our own lives, opening our hearts to forgiveness and seeing the people who have been there all along.